All right, good morning. We are in 1 Corinthians 15. And, of course, that's the greatest chapter we have on the resurrection. I want to go back to verse 32 because verse 32 helps explain verses 33 and 34. So in 1 Corinthians 15, if somebody would read verses 32 through 34, I would appreciate it.
If in the matter of men I have fought with beasts at Ephesus, what advantage is it to me? If the dead do not rise, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. Do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits. Awake to righteousness and do not sin. For some do not have the knowledge of God. I speak this to your shame. All
right, so there was the idea that if there is no resurrection, then it doesn't make any difference how we live. That's what Paul was saying. If there's no resurrection, that means there's no heaven or hell, no judgment, nothing. So he says if none of that is true, then you might as well just eat and drink. In other words, you might as well do anything you want, live any way you want, say anything you want, go anywhere you want, because what? Tomorrow we die. If there's no resurrection. And then he says, 33, do not be deceived. All right? Don't be deceived. Don't believe there's no resurrection, because that's what he's been proving throughout this chapter, is that there is a resurrection. If there is a resurrection, then how we live is extremely important, because the hope that a Christian has is directly tied to how we live. So Paul says, the hope we have is of the resurrection, and the resurrection, where we go when we die, when we're resurrected then, is directly dependent upon how we lived in this life. And that's the point. He uses reason and logic throughout this chapter. Everywhere he's using reason and logic to show that the resurrection is real and that how we live determines our resurrection as to where we go. And so, he's denying what some sinners were saying, is that there's no resurrection. He's denying that. He says, yes, there is. And because there is, it's not about eating and drinking. He says that's not what it's about. Your conduct, good habits, your ethical conduct, your moral conduct is extremely important in this life. So this goes, of course, against once saved, always saved, which teaches your conduct is not important. Once you're saved, and there's nothing you can do to lose it. Paul says that's false. That's not true. He says your habits, your behavior, your life, your conduct determines where you end up. So that's why he tells them, awake to righteousness. Some people translated this, sober up. Okay, sober up. Arouse from your ignorance. He says, do not sin, because some do not have the knowledge of God, and I'm speaking this to your shame. That's what he's saying. Sober up. Become serious. All right, that's the idea of sobering up. Become serious about your salvation. And he said, don't blame it on anybody else if you're not saved. All right? You need to wake up and don't sin. So with that, would someone read Matthew 13:15? Matthew 13:15.
For the hearts of this people have grown dull. Their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their hearts and turn, so that I should heal them.
So that's, of course, those are the words of Jesus, and describing the kind of people Paul is talking about here. They, if you don't believe in the resurrection, then that's because you've closed your eyes, you've shut your ears, you're not paying attention. That's basically what he's saying. So what he does now, he's been talking about the resurrection over and over and over in different aspects of it. But now he turns to, okay, what kind of body will we have when we're resurrected? Since the resurrection is a definite fact, what kind of body are we going to have? So he says, but someone will say, how are the dead raised up, and with what body do they come? So what's it all about? So that's what he's going to, I guess you might say he's turning to some practical aspects now of the resurrection. Some people are saying, okay, so he says, foolish one. There are some foolish people. He says, don't you understand? What you sow is not made alive unless it dies. And what you sow, you do not sow that body that shall be, but mere grain, perhaps wheat or some other grain. But God gives it a body as he pleases, and to each seed its own body. He's going to make all kinds of analogies about the resurrected body. Some people might be saying, well, what if your body is burned up and there's nothing left? How could that possibly be resurrected? Or what if you die in the ocean and fish and sharks eat all your flesh? How could you possibly be resurrected? Well, that's what Paul's getting ready to say. He says, don't you understand? What you sow is not made alive unless it dies. All right? And what you sow, you do not sow that body that shall be. You don't sow, to get a corn stalk. You don't take a great big corn cob and put it in the ground. He says that's not what it is. He says it's different, and that's what he's stressing here in these next 10 verses. It's different, all right? As far as its physical appearance, it's different. Now like he says, but God gives it a body as he pleases, and to each seed its own body. Now, even though, you plant that corn seed or wheat seed or whatever in the ground, that's got to disintegrate. All right? It's got to disintegrate, and that's what he's talking about here when he gets to our bodies. They have to disintegrate, go back into its elements and so forth. But it's still corn. In other words, if you plant a corn seed, all right, it doesn't change identity and come out wheat. It comes out corn. All right? In other words, it doesn't lose its identity, and that's an extremely important point in these next 10 verses. It doesn't lose its identity. And of course, he's going to say, neither do we. Even though our bodies disintegrate physically in the body or in the ground or wherever, when we're resurrected, we're still the same person. And of course, that's the same, when I was born, I was Bobby Stafford. I'm still Bobby Stafford. I don't look anything like it. And my body, billions and billions of cells have came to existence and died and been replaced, but I'm still the same person. And so when you plant that corn seed or wheat seed or any other kind of seed, it doesn't lose its identity. It's going to come up corn, it's going to come up wheat, it's going to come up whatever. And so it doesn't, that seed of corn is going to produce a corn stalk. It's not going to produce a wheat stalk. So it doesn't lose its identity, even though it disintegrates. So see, his point is, if God can do that with a grain of corn or a seed of corn or a seed of grain, he can do that with our bodies. See, that's where he's leading with this. If he can do that, if God's powerful enough to do that with corn or grain or whatever, he can do that with us. And that's why you should believe it. So it's the same power. In other words, the same power that causes that corn seed to disintegrate and then produce a corn stalk, that same power is going to raise us up after we physically disintegrate. It says that same power, right? So that's what he's focusing on. Then he says, 39 and through 41, all flesh is not the same flesh. But there's one kind of flesh of men, another of animals, of fish, another of birds. There's also celestial bodies and terrestrial bodies. But the glory of celestial is one, the glory of terrestrial is another. There's one glory of the sun, another glory of the moon, another glory of the stars. For one star differs from another star in glory. Again, God is the one that made all that. God is the one that made fish to have certain kind of flesh and us to have a certain kind of flesh, birds to have a certain kind of flesh. He's focusing on God's power. He says, look at the power. Just look at the natural world. Look what God has done in the natural world. He's made all of this incredible variety, in plants and animals and fish and birds. He's done all of that. Just look at the variety he has made. Look at his power. If God has the power to do that, he has the power to resurrect your body. And that's where he's going with all of this. All of these examples of planting seeds, of all the different kinds of flesh. And then he even talks about celestial and terrestrial bodies. Heavenly bodies, earthly bodies. Again, they're different. Right? God has made all of them. God has made every one of those. And if he can do that, he can raise your body from the grave. Remember, this is all about the resurrection of our bodies. The whole chapter. Everything focuses on that. And so all of these are scientific or medical truths, all right, about our bodies, about, he says, look at the sun, the moon, the stars. They're different. God has made them all. There's a difference between a star. There's a difference between a moon and a planet and all these different things. There's different kinds of terrestrial bodies. Cats and dogs do not have the same body. All right. It's different. A fish is different from a cat. But God, and this is what he wants to focus on, God made them all. God gave cats a certain type of body and dogs a certain type of body, fish a certain type of body. He made stars a certain type of body and moons a certain type of body. God did all of that. So he has the power to bring us from the dust of the earth, dust of the ground, and give us a new body, but still have the same identity. And that's what all of these, from verse 35 all the way down to the bottom, that's his main point. God has the power to do all of that. Just look around you. Look at all the varieties that he's made. Look at how he's made reproduction in the plant world. Look at how he's done all of that. And so that's what you need to remember, he says. So now would someone read 42 through 44? Now he's going to really start focusing on our bodies.
So also is the resurrection of the dead. It is sown in corruption. It is raised in incorruption. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body and there is a spiritual body.
In those three verses, I think the most important word has two letters. It. It. The body, what? It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory. Same thing. The same thing that's sown is raised. It's it. It's sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It. Same thing that's buried is raised. It. The same thing. Yes.
I think it's important that you pointed out that it's our identity,
Yes.
because I think that's what it is.
That's
Your
exactly what it
identity
is.
died in this body. Your identity comes back in this
Yeah.
body.
It's the same identity. Exactly. And so regardless of how a person dies, now he's going to talk about the exceptions here in a minute as far as those people who are alive when Christ returns, but everybody else, their bodies dies. They die, and regardless of how they die, doesn't make any difference. Doesn't make any difference. Because regardless of how the body is sown, the natural body, the physical body, the fleshly body, doesn't make any difference how it dies. Because the identity stays there. It stays there. It doesn't change. And so there's that, comparison. All right? Yeah, our body, it's lowered into the grave. All right? And again, regardless of how we die, doesn't make any difference. But the same person that goes into the grave, that identity, is going to come out. When I'm resurrected someday, it's still going to be Bobby Stafford. That identity doesn't change. All right? And he's going to talk about, in other verses, talk about our looks, but that's not what he's focusing on. He's talking about who we are. Who we are. So, with that, would someone read Philippians 3, verses 20 and 21? Philippians 3, verses 20 and 21. Okay?
For our citizenship is in heaven, from which we also eagerly wait for the Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, who will transform our lowly body may be conformed to his glorious body, according to the working by which he is able even to subdue all things to himself.
Okay, what's he going to do? He's going to change our earthly, vile, lowly body. Because he has the power to do it. See, we don't, but God does. So he's going to change our body. Now, what about if someone read Luke 20, verse 36?
Neither can they die anymore, for they are equal unto the angels, and are the children of God, being the children of the resurrection.
Yep, children of the resurrection. Children of the resurrection. And then 1 John 3, the first two verses of that chapter.
1 John 3.
The first two verses.
Behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God. Therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew him not. Beloved, now are we the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be, but what we know that, when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is.
Okay. Again, we can't understand what a resurrected body is. But one day we will understand it. One day we'll understand. We can't understand the power that God has, the ability that he has. But one day, all right, one day we will. So he says our bodies, they're sown in corruption. These fleshly bodies are not made for eternity. They decay. They become corrupted. They fade away. All right. And as they are, this body I have right now is not fit for heaven anyway. It's not fit for that heavenly realm. So it has to be changed. It has to be changed. And that's what God is going to do for us. See, right now it's a dishonorable body. Well, we die because sin was brought into the world back in the Garden of Eden, and that brought physical death. So it is dishonorable, but it's going to be raised in glory. It's a weak body. This body we have is weak compared to our new body. See, it's sown a natural body. It's not the one we have right now. It's fleshly. It's not fit for heaven. It's not able to live forever. So it has to be changed. And it's going to be changed into a spiritual body. We don't understand what that's like, but one day we will. It says one day we will understand, as he says, when he shall appear, back in 1 John 3. When Christ appears, our bodies are changed, then we'll understand what the resurrected body is like. But right now, the only body we can understand right now is this natural fleshly body. That's the only one we can understand. We don't understand the others. And so he says, verse 45, the first man, Adam, became a living being. And of course, we go back to the first few chapters of Genesis, and we know how Adam, basically it says he came from the dust of the earth. And so we understand that. That's how he became a living being. God gave him life back in the Garden of Eden. That's how the first man came about. No, he didn't evolve from sort of lower animals. No, God gave him life directly. And the last Adam, which of course is Christ, that he's already talked about in this chapter, he talks about it back in Romans, became a life-giving spirit. And he's, of course, Christ being part of the Godhead is the one that's going to do that. He's the one that's going to give us spiritual life. And so he says the spiritual is not first. Okay? Spiritual is not first. We're born into this world with a natural physical body. That's how everybody comes about. We're all given a natural physical body. But that's not the body that's going to inherit eternity. Okay? It has to be changed. And so, pages stuff. So he says, the first man was of the earth, made of dust. Adam was. The second man is the Lord from heaven, which we just talked about that very thing. As was the man of dust, so also are those who are made of dust. And as is the heavenly man, so also are those who are heavenly. And as we have borne the image of the man of dust, we have the same image that Adam has. Adam had a physical fleshly body, so do we. We shall also bear the image of the heavenly man, going back to what he said there in 1 John 3. We don't understand what the new body is going to be like, but it's going to be like Christ. That's what he said there in 1 John 3, 1 and 2. So these bodies has to be changed. Jesus, he had to be born. Since he was going to be our high priest, he had to be born with a fleshly, physical body, just like ours, so that he would understand us. He had that, he had heart and lungs and skin and eyes, just like we do. So that part of him was like our bodies. But, think about the transfiguration. When he went up on the hill with Peter, James, and John, and his body was transfigured. So in some sense, that's our resurrected body. We're going to be transfigured. We're going to be transformed. And we're going to be transformed into his image. And again, we can't understand exactly what that's like.
So I think it's good to point out that our existence began when we were conceived.
Mm-hmm.
Christ existed before
That's a very good point.
Came into the body.
A very good point. Yeah, we didn't exist before we were conceived. That's right. We didn't have any sort of existence, but that's not true of Christ.
There are some people that kind of have the reincarnation mindset.
Yeah,
that they're
right.
these souls
Mm-hmm.
that exist, and somebody's born, so God puts this soul in that body.
Right.
I don't see that.
Yeah, that definitely not the case here at all. Very true. Well, that's a good place to stop. He's going to finish the chapter talking about death and what's going to happen to those people who are alive when Christ returns.